Now, what we want to do, the reason I'm spending time going back to Colonial Williamsburg, because there's so much to learn. And porches are something that we've lost and forgotten how to build. Just did a video on my daughter's house and just this junky, slapped together parts and pieces that look like a porch, right? We've just lost the magic. And so going back to a place like Colonial Williamsburg, you remember, oh yeah, there's a good porch. Now, the variety of porches and the stories that they tell. I mean, porches can communicate style, they can communicate taste, they can communicate hierarchy, they can communicate so many things. Because they're oftentimes attached to the front of the house, they become a very important architectural element. Okay, so this is the Finny house, and this was Mr. Finny, Colonel Finny, got it in the 1770s. He was actually the mayor of Williamsburg at one point. He was helping the supplies of the Colonial Army, an important figure, okay? This porch, and we're gonna see a bunch of porches as we go through Colonial Williamsburg, but look at the great details on this portico as it comes out. You've got engaged pilasters. The pilasters have entasis in them. You don't see it a ton, but you do see the entasis there. They're also up on pedestals. And so that little pedestal and the columns in the front with the fluting, really elegant. They don't have the typical architrave there. They have a fretwork architrave with these ring motifs that are coming together, that are kind of looping together there. So it's kind of a different way of elevating the porch. Typically, the frieze is where they decorate it, and the architrave is pretty simple and strong. In this case, the architrave is decorated and the frieze is pulvinated. So kind of an interesting detail. They got modillions up there in the cornice, dentils, right? This is an elevated porch, fluted columns, pedestals, decoration. This is probably one of the more elevated porches at Williamsburg. So this is a good example kind of on the hierarchy level of something that's really pretty special, because there's other porches and porticos that are just hoods, right? There are no columns. So anyway, this is a real great example. The Finny house has been copied a number of times. We are having a beer over there talking to somebody and said, yeah, my house is a copy of the Finny house. So these houses in these examples have been copied, have been reproduced. They're wonderful. This is part of the reason why. There's this book, The Restoration of Colonial Williamsburg, that shows some of these houses with Victorian porches on it or arts and crafts porches on it that get taken away later as they do the research and figure out that it's really an older house with a newer porch. So porches can be defining architecturally and really help communicate the character and the style. But main things I want you to learn is notice that the porches almost all have this column and beam relationship where the neck of the column lines up with the beam above, the capital sticks out past it out into the air. I've shown that video, I've taught that a few times and everybody fights me on it. Not everybody, a lot of people will fight me on that. Well, you're just gonna get rain on it. Look, they've been doing it for 2,000 years. I think it's okay. The beam to neck of the column relationship, the full entablature that happens, that you've got an architrave, a frieze, and a cornice, how those relate together, the split fillet that is part of the pediment that goes along there. So if you just study those porches, if you just look at them and go, how did they build that? And try to build that again, you'll be building great porches. Now this could be a total docent story. And docent stories are basically that sometimes docents in historic buildings will tell better stories than really actually existed. So this might be a docent story. But the reason there's no columns on this was because of the war, that they couldn't get the columns that they had ordered from England because of the Revolutionary War. Could be a complete fabrication, but those columns should have gone on top of that. It's not normal to have a big pediment like that sit out there, but it was built cantilevered and everything else, so obviously it's not falling down. But that was a story I was told. I'm gonna check and see, maybe some of you guys know whether that's true or not. That's a fun story. Because it's such an early colonial village, okay, sometimes these porches are vernacular in style, okay? They don't follow all the classical rules. They're shaped columns. Sometimes they go right up to an eave, and there's a very simple cornice or architrave going across. So there's things to learn from those as well. And that's what's fun for the variety of those houses, that you've got, very wealthy houses and very simple houses, almost workman cottages. coffee houses and different things like that, and you'll see all different styles. Now look at this porch, right? So we were just looking at the Finny house porch. Now we've got something that's really dressed down. This commercial building is a coffee house. A lot of resistance was going on in here, but great details. Look at the chamfering, okay? Not only is this post chamfered, okay, it has its lamb's tongue detail. That's called a lamb's tongue detail here. And we're gonna see this detail over and over again. We'll talk about it when we talk about the siding, but the way they've got this really large sill here, and there's a bead in the bottom of the sill, and it ties into the beaded siding that goes across here. I love this detail, and we're gonna see it on other buildings and other houses here. Here's what happens today. You get vinyl siding or metal siding, and you put these clips on your wall, and then you snap your siding into the clips, and you get this, and it just runs up the wall at a standard of 5 inches or whatever it goes up. There's no way of organizing it so that it ties in with the other pieces of architecture. What happens with handmade things like this is you're actually able to adjust each of those faces 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, probably not that much, 1/8 of an inch, just this little bit so that it can line up so all these details start tying together. It's one of the things I love about historic buildings. Notice too that the balustrades are fun. The balustrades are, sometimes they're Chippendales, sometimes they're panels, sometimes they're wood and panels. And so the variety of just the railings that go across excites me because you realize, gosh, there's a lot we can do here. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of design choices we can make that aren't just the standard off-the-shelf kind of decisions. Some of these porches don't even make sense classically. They look almost like a Victorian cottage. And so some of these things have arches over them and kind of weird shaped columns and things like that. Again, that variety is a lot of fun and gives you pause and gives you a chance to go, oh, we have more opportunity here. So taking it outside the context of Colonial Williamsburg is that porch styles really change the look of a house over time. From Victorian porches, which could be crazy, to Greek Revival porches. In fact, there's the Greek Revival house there. Notice those columns. Those columns are huge. They follow that Greek temple kind of massive sizing, massive scale. Very different from the porches you see in Colonial Williamsburg. So I point that out to say, guys, look, the dial and the opportunity isn't just, kind of here to here. It's here to here, right? It's just an incredible opportunity of variety of looking at porches, of the way to do columns, the way to do balustrades that I think can make a huge difference in your game. So right here, I see 4 porches, okay? 3 across the street and 1 here. And they're all different. They're all unique and fun. Part of copying the past, part of being inspired by the past is looking at a column like this and figuring out how I'm going to do that. Because that would be a custom turned column, right? But it also has a really bunch of unique details the way all this comes together. So it communicates and it tells a neat story. Across the street, we've got a porch that actually comes up the side, even the way that you enter that. The 2 porches across the street do the same thing. There's a little skirt detail right there that is scalloped out, and these other boards, you're just gonna see unique details. I mean, that balustrade over there is basically straight boards caught into a balustrade, and then these balusters, the little thin things on top, only showing about this much. The total height's probably 30 inches. So unique columns, chamfered edges, really unique balustrade. That would be a fun one for me to recreate. And then you've got fluted columns over there. Basically, they're taking that fluted column and they've got it, the entasis broken out because it's straight, but as soon as the fluting starts, that's where that upper 2/3 of entasis happens. So I'm looking at a Doric porch over there with columns that communicate that hierarchy and that beauty. So that engaged pilaster is something you see on all of these porches, okay? There's a fluted one over there, there's a simple one there, but that engaged pilaster, okay, stuck into the wall is a typical classical detail that people ask me about. Well, why do you do that? Why? Because it gives visual support as that architrave runs back into the thing. It engages it into the house and makes it look better. So if you're not putting the engaged pilasters on your porches, you need to, because all of these have them and they look better because of it. You might go, oh, I really like it. Why is it so charming? Dig into those details because that matters. Fun stuff here, 4 porches, all different, all unique ways. And the problem, guys, what happens today is we're all ordering from the same catalogs. And so we're all ordering the same ugly columns and the same, there has to be some customization that's happening on your jobs. There has to be some building oomph that you're putting into your job so that they're special, so that they look unique. And you can only do that with handwork. You can't, there aren't manufacturers making that stuff anymore. So you have to be creative and be a builder and build beautiful things. And you come to the place like this, you get inspired, and then you build kick-ass stuff. So I talked about that house with the hood. You know, there's paneling down the side, okay, that establishes the outside dimensions of that. The paneling underneath the hood, right, that kind of matches that high style. The door is this crazy crisscross patterns of raised panels. And so it's a rich element, okay? You know, there are no columns, there are no brackets. It kind of looks stuck on a little bit, but because of the way they did the paneling, the way they did that stuff, it's interesting. They've got, you know, an interesting peak there. They've got an interesting, you know, face on it with the tongue and groove. Because of Colonial Williamsburg authenticity, because of the research they did, we can trust it, okay? This wasn't some Joe Schmo kind of try to come up with a design idea. This actually has historic merit. Because of that, we can look at it with kind of fresh eyes and go, And I used that kind of entry for my daughter's house when I was working on their 1940s house of what was my pediment going to look like? How was I going to do it? And I took that inspiration. I used mine with brackets and a little bit different, but this is inspirational. This is looking at stuff that's cool. Speaking of the research, if you get the book, Restoring Colonial Williamsburg, the new one that just came out, you'll see before and after pictures of these houses. There's one, the Taylor house, that has this pretty typical square column porch that goes on the front of it. And then you see the shed roofed porch that was actually the historic one. You're like, oh, that really did change quite a bit. And wow, I haven't seen that kind of porch. And that's an interesting way of treating that entry. And so the magic of Colonial Williamsburg is knowing that each of those things that you're looking at has historic precedent, has real historic value, and you can take it seriously. Because sometimes you drive through neighborhoods and it's like, oh, is that even original? What is that? You can go to there and go, it's all original. So cool stuff. Porches are huge. So you need to learn from the past. You need to study the past, because just going there and looking at those and realizing that for a back porch and a front porch and all the different ways it can be built, it is a master skill. I hope you guys can learn it.